So tell us, Sean, about EDRC in general and, some of the other platforms that you all have.
Sure. So the Energy Drone and Robotics Coalition is really made up of sector. We obviously are within energy and industrial critical infrastructure, but we cover a really broad area within that sandbox. So that means we're powering utilities, generation, transmission, distribution. We also cover everything in the fuels for utilities, from nuclear to fossil like natural gas and coal to renewables. So we get into solar and wind. And then when we move over from power and utilities, we switch to oil and gas. And then we start to use terms like upstream, midstream, downstream, meaning the drilling and exploration and production of oil and natural gas, the transportation of that in pipelines and storage tanks. And when we get down to the distribution, that gets into what we call the downstream, which is refineries, petrochemical, LNG. So all the different ways that oil is used. And then last but not least, we get into related sectors like engineering, construction, mining, that are also in the critical infrastructure sandbox. So any way that they're using autonomous solutions or uncrewed solutions, that's really where we try to make sure that we're advocating and bringing new technologies to the forefront and coming up with what are the best use cases and best practices. So everything that's tactical, that's happening now, not really so much what's going to be happening in 10 years.
Gotcha. And you have so many platforms. This event is one of many. You mentioned some online events that you have held in the past, but you also have newsletter. You have other related, let's just call them portfolios. So could you kind of walk us through some of that, Sean?
Sure, Don. So it's really, for us, we consider them like channels. So people like to consume information from time to time in various ways. So we have some people who only interact with us on social media, and that's really their primary way that they get news or see links to use cases or white papers or reports or sessions on demand from our live events or webinars. And then obviously we have all the other channels that produce that. So we have webinars and digital events. We have benchmark and sector reports that we do on key topics like BV loss, or benchmark studies as to what everyone's flying, what type of hardware, software, services, as well as, of course, our live events like you and I are connecting today here at our annual summit. So really try to have a wide portfolio of platforms and channels so that people can consume information the way they most want to, so that they're comfortable with it, and we help reach a broader audience globally.
Gotcha. And just to be clear, because I think we may have had a little bit of glitching in the very beginning, we are live from the Energy Drone Robotics Coalition Summit here in Houston, Texas. I think Sean referred to this as the Petro Metro during our clubhouse last week, which, by the way, just to kind of divert and squirrel for a second, that clubhouse was our #1 live of all time with 108 listeners that dialed in. And Sean right now is #3 of all time in our clubhouse. And we've been doing those since a little bit over a year now. And, the replays, I think, started maybe last November. So that's where we have, the ability to keep track. But Sean, yeah, go back and listen to it, everybody. It's amazing.
Excited. We're definitely going to try to bring even more people in to listen and hopefully consume it on the back end.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this year's event, because we kind of alluded to earlier the fact that it's essentially doubled in size. Obviously last year we're still a little bit, let's just call it, deeper into COVID. What do you think has kind of contributed to the success of this event?
Sure, and you're absolutely right, Don. So last year is what we use the term COVID heavy. So COVID heavy, COVID light. Unfortunately, we're not COVID free quite yet. So yeah. COVID heavy was where we were last year. And I think we had a couple things that were happening. You had some people that still weren't comfortable traveling on a personal level. A certain amount of folks who were younger who weren't able to get, shots and things like that.
Yep.
The other issue I think we ran into was there was a lot of events that all happened within a few weeks of each other in that third and fourth quarter. So we were in a very unusual time in October. And last but not least for us, in the energy industry, that's considered turnaround, okay, months. So that's when power utilities and petrochemical plants and refineries do a ton of their maintenance work.
Oh, wow.
So drones and robots are really deployed a lot during that time period before you switch from summer to winter. So they're doing a lot of work there. So all that, I think, certainly hurt us on our overall attendance and was a driver. So we were happy to see that as the low.
Yeah.
And now to be doubling coming back shows that really we're right back to where we were in 2019. So in the before times of COVID. And what it shows, I think, is that people are excited about coming together. They want to get information. We've got a record number of energy companies who've sent representatives from their UAV and robotics programs. And so I feel like that shows that during that time period over the last 2 years when most things were digital, that a lot of programs continue to evolve and grow. And now we're able to share those use cases and best practices live with each other here at the summit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. By the way, Sean, if you're noticing, there's a lot of folks out there saying hello. So we got Sahil Boy saying good evening, coming from us, presumably from across the globe, because it's still kind of morning here in Houston. Steven Zirkle, greetings, wants to live in Houston and work here, by the way. And Dave Dahlia saying good morning. So thanks everybody out there. Keep it coming. We are live, so we love to hear from you, where you're from. If you have any questions for Sean, kind of anything at all, just drop that in the chat and we'll absolutely get to those questions. Sean, what I noticed this year, because I was here last year as well, not only the number of booths, but like the quality of companies that are here. You mentioned some of these oil and gas companies as well. But I've seen so many like drone and robot companies here this year. Autel has a showing, Volatus Aerospace has this ginormous, like I've never seen a drone as big as the one that is sitting on your floor right now. Everybody, I posted a picture up to my Twitter yesterday and my LinkedIn. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. I'm literally standing between these blades just to give perspective on how ginormous this thing is. And, this idea of shore to, ship to shore, cargo deliveries and things that are going to be occurring in this energy sector and beyond, I think are just spectacular. So as you're looking around the floor, and I know you can't necessarily pick favorites, but let's talk about some of the cool things you're seeing, Sean, because there's a lot to see, a lot to hear. In the last couple of days, what has jumped out at you as you've walked the floor and listened to folks?
Sure. So it is tough, like you say. It's can't talk about which is your favorite child or your favorite pet. So it is hard because we are truly excited about all the technologies that are out there. But what we are seeing, just let's start on the hardware side. So you're talking about Scorpion, which is made by Full Throttle Aerial.
It's a local Texas company, right? Yeah.
Right,
Steve Dixon.
So
yep.
Lifts 1,000 pounds. I mean, this thing is gigantic.
It's crazy.
And Volatus is a representative for that moving forward, but they brought some of their others as well, which are also heavy lift. So that whole heavy lift area, we also have Skyfront, who's brought heavy lift.
Yep.
We're excited about all the different drones that are coming about and the new use cases that we're really just on the cusp, because so much of this industry focuses on UAM and potential of air taxis and things like that. And those are fascinating and will be an exciting game changer for the transportation market, which is so gigantic.
Yep.
But for us here in energy and industrial, we see it much faster, that these things are happening now and will be happening much more quickly, that we're able to move parts and material, a few hundred miles in a very short amount of time. So I think that one's certainly exciting. The other thing I think is exciting is to see so many different companies who are showcasing their hardware, such as Flyability's got the new Helios 3
Yes,
been
Maggie,
a
my
big
friend
hit.
Maggie Schuster, who co-hosts Clubhouse with me, Sean, was
Yeah.
flying that last night. They had a little happy hour, event over at Mahoney's here, and yeah, she got to fly the Helios 3. Super
Yeah.
cool, super easy.
Yeah, and for those who fly, in that area for internal inspections and have been using the traps in the Helios too, a lot of the folks who are here from the energy companies are having their first chance to really give a chance to fly it. As said, it's definitely a huge evolution. So it's exciting when you see new tech come about on that standpoint. And then also on the hardware, I think it's exciting to see, as you mentioned, what we're starting to see now in the ground vehicles, the crawlers, the submersibles. I mean, those are all also exciting. And then that kind of starts to then move over into some of the fleet management software and some of the project software that's now multi-device enabled. So that's very exciting. We got to hear from Andre at Drone Deploy how they're using it on aerial and drones and satellites. And then on the data side, I think we're seeing some very exciting companies that are over in the exhibit hall that on how they're handling that data, how they're using AI and ML to quickly analyze, look for faults, and most importantly, how they're making that data actionable. And I think that's probably one of the biggest growth areas that we're seeing in this industry.
I agree.
As much as evolution of hardware is happening, I think the software side is moving even faster.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we answered Justin Hoffman's question, who said, what tech are you most excited about that you've seen at the expo this week? I mean, I think you've alluded to this, but any others kind of jumping out? Sean, you mentioned in Clubhouse last week, there's going to be a pack of drone dogs, a pack of spots out there, and there definitely have been spots out there.
There are, and what's interesting about that, Dawn, is last year we started to see the quadrupeds coming about just unto themselves. Yeah, they had some attachments, but this year we're seeing a lot more payloads that they have: acoustic, lidar, thermal, that are being used for all the other types of not just inspections but methane detection. And so that's kind of exciting to see a tool like Spot from Boston Dynamics that is evolving because of the payloads they're able to put on there. Yep. And I would also like to say that to Justin, that's another area that, once again, could be overlooked. But we've got great companies that are showcasing really new versions of their payloads. Yep. They're smaller, they're lighter, they're better. And I mean, that's exciting as well, because that's going to open up even more use cases, because the quality of the data starts to become more consistent, better, and you're able to fly longer because the payloads aren't as heavy as they were before. Yeah,
absolutely. We always say, data is king, but that data comes from those sensors. And, like you said, Sean, that the different, the multiple different sensors that are out there, I'm thinking multispectral.
Right.
Too. Yep. The fact that you can have two different drone dogs or, spots out there with different sensors on in one location to get that feed. And then, as you mentioned, this idea of kind of orchestrating that data. And I'm going to give a shout out real quick to a company that's new entrant, Robotics, out of Miami. They were actually on a panel. So I hosted a panel called Drones and Related Technology Are Critical to Infrastructure. And it was Ed Bucas, CEO of Robotics. By the way, all of these were taped, right, Sean?
Right. They were.
And so how can people tap into those?
Yeah. So your panel, which was fantastic, Dawn, which really covered great tech. That's because if you think about it, all those stakeholders have to come together, right, for the ecosystem. Yep. So you have to have the tech, you have to have the operators, the drone service providers or robotic service providers, and you have to have the asset owners. All of that has to come to place, and that's what we really try to bring together here at the summit. I think your panel did a great job of showcasing the tech. But to answer your question directly, starting Monday, all the sessions that happened here at the summit have been recorded and are going to be going up live and available on demand. So people would be able to see 100% of the sessions who weren't able to unfortunately make it with us, and be able to see those and catch up on everything, see the presentation, the speakers, and the video.
Wow, that's awesome. So back to my panel. So we had Ed Bucas from Robotics. We had Don Bershaw from True Weather, the Weather Don. And that guy's been running around here like crazy, just talking to people because he's trying to get sensors everywhere he can to fill that weather data gap. Who else? We had Sean Guerre from Easy Aerial. This is what I'm talking about. The quality people. Easy Aerial, if y'all don't know, they're a blue UAS company. And they just won the AUVSI Excellence Award in Orlando a couple months ago. And we had Pramod Raheza from Airgility. And Airgility, this is their second year showing here. I actually met Pramod here last year, and they're flying around their Minotaur drone, which is so cool. It kind of pivots. The camera stays stable, and the drone itself pivots. And just super cool stuff. So that was our panel, and they're all Carosoft partners. So really, really cool. Justin Hoffman is saying, by the way, very keen to bring land, sea, and air drone solutions out there to inspections, and it is all about networking these. Right? These assets.
Absolutely.
That's what we're seeing.
No, absolutely. People are really saying at the end of the day, each of these devices is a tool, right, Justin? So in theory, it doesn't really matter whether it swims, crawls, or flies. Or all the above. The beauty is how do I best use the tool to inspect the asset, or how do I reduce by putting my personnel in harm's way with things like having to build up scaffolding, putting people in tanks for inspection.
Or nukes. Good Lord.
There's a variety of things, and certainly nuclear, they only have so much time that they're allowed to spend in those areas per year.
Right.
So if I can reduce that by putting a tool in there, a device that's autonomous, and allows it to happen without personnel, that's going to be a win. Back to Airgility, they've had some real crowds showing up at the drone zone here when that thing flies. I mean, it's interesting to watch the different ones, but I know Airgility has been very popular with folks coming to see that fly over the last couple of days.
Yeah, so Sean just alluded to this drone zone. Not only do they have a drone zone, which is a caged kind of netted area where people can fly their drones and folks can see them live in action, but also you've got Robot Row, right? So you set up an area for the robots to like spot, or or the deep trekker, pipe trekker. That's one example of one of their products, to kind of roam around, if you will, in a designated area at the show, which I think is really super cool. Chris Geneseth is out there. He's saying he'd like to hear more about how, Sean, you attracted more energy professionals to the conference and not just drone-specific people.
Great question. And fortunately, it's actually happening within the energy companies themselves. So as I was just mentioning, they're looking at more and more of these devices as tools and more use cases. And so that's really what's helped draw, as you saw early days, as companies were putting together and utilizing drones or robots. They were doing proof of concept, field trials, right? We heard all these terms.
Yep.
And that's really
demos
too,
yeah.
And they're still doing that by all means.
Yeah.
And we have companies here, energy companies, who are just standing up their programs. There's several companies here from the pipeline industry that have not using any drones whatsoever, and they're just starting. But as those companies have evolved over the last 6 or 7 years and scaled, what we're seeing is deployment on an operational level. So now it's asset inspectors and maintenance and T&D maintains, and so we're starting, really, we've moved out of the innovation and R&D shop, and we're out in the field. And there's a lot more pilots, and there's a lot more projects, a lot more flights, and a lot more use of robotics. And so honestly, that's where the growth is occurring in the number of folks who are joining the community in all of our channels. And I think that's why we've seen substantial growth in not just the number of energy companies, but the number of people they're bringing to come to the summit, because they're actually deploying on a much greater level than they were just 2-3 years ago.
And it's not just the companies that are producing the robots, the software, the drones, these energy professionals. Sean, I've seen students and teachers here, and honestly, that is not something. And when I say students, I've seen little kids here, and I was so excited to see a dad like walking around his little boy and little girl. They all had their little badges on, and they were looking at the drones in awe, especially that giant scorpion. And I think that's spectacular that you've opened it up to families and other people. Do you have a vision to like attract more young people to the event as well?
We do. It's important for us to make sure that next generation is getting excited about drone and robotics, or we're helping to see that where they're, maybe it's a hobby. So for instance, what you're talking about is we have kids who are here from middle school who are in robotics clubs and drone clubs, and they're seeing that that's something that they enjoy as a hobby or passion, that there's a career path. And so it's important for us to be able to do that. And we've been very fortunate over the last few years to grow that to now through the high school into college. We have several colleges here who are bringing their folks who are part of their drones, robotic, and engineering programs. And this is the first time that we have a group with us, I'll give a shout out to, called Drone Corps. And they brought a couple dozen of their folks, and that's a part of Job Corps.
Wow.
Specifically a section that deals with drones. And so I think there's a whole lot of things that we can do. It's incumbent upon us as the Energy Drone Coalition to help shape and bring people for the future who are going to be operating and involved with drones and robotics, in the next generation.
Well, that's huge. And, as we think about how far we come, there's still challenges that remain. And, one of the first panels that I got to watch on Monday was a spectacular panel on beyond visual line of sight in oil and gas. It was moderated by John Damish from Iris Automation, and had Census Technologies and Crown Castle Consulting, Nancy Chrisman, and Aerodyne, the Aerodyne Group, doing some cool stuff in Malaysia. But one thing that jumped out at me from that panel is that this storytelling, getting the word out to the public is still a huge, and when I say public, not just to these kids and their parents and teachers, but to our government representatives as well. So you've been very involved. I mean, Texas in general, right, between AUVSI, Lone Star, and what you're doing, Sean, and so many other folks here in Texas, been very involved in moving the drone, the robotics, advanced air mobility industries forward. How do you see that evolving maybe in the near future here in Texas? Because I think there's some great things happening here.
There certainly are, and I think it's going to happen in multiple ways. So back to the BVLOS panel and some of the other discussions that have been happening in the conference about BVLOS, is what we're seeing is a consistency of waivers being granted, so that it is still the exception to the rule. You do have to fly within the rules and have waivers, but they're happening on a more frequent basis. The use case is made. We're seeing the technology is there for detect and avoid, the capability to be able to fly BVLOS in a responsible and safe way. So I think we're going to see continued movement, hopefully, from that side of, I think, waivers being granted at hopefully a rapid pace that allows people to continue to evolve and build their programs. You're also starting to see some groups get waivers that are larger in scope. So around drone delivery, so we're seeing some of those things up in North Texas, up in Dallas. We're starting to see some of the drones in a box, like American Robotics, getting very unique waivers that allow for you to fly multiple drones without having a pilot on scene. So I think there's some uniqueness there that's happening. And last but not least, I think there's 2 or 3 different initiatives of folks who are here, and I think we've got to put a panel on this next year, who are building corridors. And we're seeing that in several states, North Dakota, New York. So I think that that's a very exciting thing that we need to be discussing, is the ability to potentially build these safe corridors that will allow for BVLOS for a lot of use cases as well.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of questions out there, Sean. This one's more maybe about safety and, your thinking here with the low cost or barrier to entry, right, to become a drone service, right? You can have one person go out, buy a drone, say I'm a drone service provider, if you will. Do you foresee an opportunity to ensure that one man and his drone essentially don't give professionals that are investing in the tech and these services a bad name?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'd say it's somewhat fortunate given the sector we're in. And there are many sectors that are utilizing drones and robotics very successfully and have all different needs. But let's just use two of them as an example.
Yep.
I'm sure the people who fly for real estate are being safe, doing the type of work, but that's where you see an individual with a drone having a real chance of success because you obviously have a fairly low barrier of entry in the tech, the insurance, and the qualifications they need in order to fly. Whereas when you're around critical infrastructure, if you're flying for surveying, mapping, or inspection for a refinery or transmission substation or something along those lines, I think it's going to be a lot less likely that you're going to have an individual with fairly simple tech and a low level of training winning that kind of, I'd say, project. So I think that just in and of itself, critical infrastructure somewhat self-selects to probably people who have a little bit more evolved training and tech in order for them to be even available to win a bid or a project for something that's around critical infrastructure.
Well, and I would say the same, Sean. I totally agree. And I would say the same for beyond visual line of sight operations in general, right? I think those operations take additional skill, training, and experience. Like you just cannot, right, hop on a box and go BVLOS and if you just bought your drone. I mean, that's just not happening. No. And we'll see what happens with the FAA's Beyond Visual Line of Sight Aviation Rulemaking Committee recommendations, and if we're going to see a notice of public rulemaking out anytime soon. But one of those recommendations was enhanced training for those type of advanced operations. So we shall see. And we have a question, Sean. I don't know if you can answer it. I think I can, but I'll punt it to you. How are UAS hours being verified?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know that within the specific energy companies, that as part of the software platforms that they use, that is what they're using. So when you are mapping out the project that you're going to be doing, that they use that to verify the hours. And I know that they do that and tie it back to individual pilots, because I can tell you whether it's a large drone service provider or whether it's an in-house within an energy company, that's a really important part for them to be able to keep track of. So they want to know the amount of hours that are on a drone, that are on the payload, that are on the pilot, and they want to know the types of projects they're flying, because that's going to help them move up in certification and the types of projects they're allowed to do. So it's a fairly complex system, but I know I'm just going to use the simple term of software is what they're using to keep track of it. How is it verified? I'm assuming tied back to the project. So in other words, it takes X amount of time for that project to fly, and that's in the software, and that pilot and or equipment is then getting attached to it for verification. But I'm not entirely sure that that covers the verification question.
No, I feel like it does. And I was going to actually, that's what I was going to say, software. And, there's a number of companies doing that. Robotics on my panel talked about that fact. Like you can plan a mission, but then you can also validate that that mission was performed to that plan or in a different manner. And that includes, I believe, the hours that were attributed to that and all the different parameters. So you see this advanced analytics across the board, using artificial intelligence, machine learning, and that's one company that's here, and there's several others that are doing that kind of, I'll call it hours verification. So great stuff. Let's pivot for a second, Sean, and say like what's coming up next. Like, so we're closing this down. I think noon is starts to break down the booths and whatnot today. It's been a great week. What's next on the horizon for you, for EDRC?
Sure. So we're going to all take, obviously, a well-received break, have a cerveza and a couple tacos, and we're going to thank everyone who participated in any capacity. We're going to make sure that we get this information out to the community, like we talked about, in all of our channels. So it's available whether it's on demand on video or whether we're repurposing into interviews that are going to be going out in our newsletter channels. And of course, we're going to wrap it all up and do a post-event report that we put out to the community as well with some of the key findings from like the asset owner roundtable. So those are kind of the key wrap up that we'll be doing in order to get information out. But then as the coalition, we'll start working on our next set of sector reports. Also in the third and fourth quarter, we put together our benchmark survey where we ask everybody in the industry to tell us more about what type of hardware you're using, what type of payloads, what type of flights, what type of training and certification you're using for your pilots. And then we get into all the software for fleet management, flight management, as well as what you're using to analyze your data. And so we go through quite a bit there in order to put together a survey that we put out at no charge to the entire industry for them to understand how we've evolved and how that's changed year over year. So that'll be a big thing in third and fourth quarter. Last but not least, we still bring people together at our Bots and Brews quarterly meetups. And we're looking forward to doing that, not just here in Houston, but we're also going to be headed up the road a little bit to Austin to do that as well. So we're going to have that be going on in the third and fourth quarter. And then certainly, as soon as you get to the end of the year, what are about 6 months away from the summit again?
Yeah.
So we're certainly planning that out. So we're putting information out in all of our channels as much as, daily, really, and trying to make sure that we keep everyone moving in the right direction with their best practices and use cases.
Well, if y'all are not subscribed to EDRC and following what they're doing on their website, and if you're local and you're not going to Bots and Brews, you're missing out. You don't need to be part of the oil and gas sector to get a lot of value added from this, because frankly, a lot of the tech here, a lot of the issues, they're cross-cutting. Beyond visual line of sight is an issue for virtually every single market sector to succeed. And so this information is so helpful. I love your newsletter, Sean. So I'm going to give a shout out. I met Megan Horn. She is, let's call her the punniest gal out there. She's really punched up your newsletter quite a bit. And, she's been sitting across from my booth. I was in booth 110 this week, and we just really hit it off. And I think she's spectacular. I love the work she's doing, and your weekly newsletter is one. Once again, y'all need to subscribe to it, because the information, it's multi-domain, it's interesting, it's actually funny. So thank you for doing that and for hiring Megan. We love her.
Thank you. She's awesome.
She is. I want to talk a little bit about next year, and since we do some reveals on this show, we're going to do one right now. So big news for both of us, actually. We collaborated very closely this year on a whole host of things, including my booth and, the podcast we did from here live, including this one. Hopefully doing a live stream here shortly, which is surprise because yesterday's didn't work out. So I think we'll be doing that. But next year, we're bringing the Law Tech Connect workshop Energy Edition to this summit in June. And I am so excited, Sean, for this.
We are as well. We recognize that obviously the legal aspects are paramount and hit a lot of areas, crossover between safety, certification, and as we talked about, the companies that we work with here at Energy Drone, the Robotics Coalition, large energy companies who have large assets. And so I think it's going to be great to bring in the legal eagles and have them get together and be able to talk through some of these big issues. And having that, I think, at the very beginning of the summit next year is going to be great. And I think it'll be wonderful for twofold. I think it's going to bring a group of people together that may not always feel like this is their place because we talk so much operations. And then secondarily, I think it's going to help enlighten a lot of our community about some of the legal issues. So I think we're going to have a nice crossover between the two communities that's going to be very beneficial to both.
Yeah, well, so this one's going to be a little unique, unlike the one I did at AUVSI, which was like 8-hour, all day session. This will be a targeted 4-hour energy focused, workshop. The idea is it's not for lawyers. It is for lawyers, but not just for lawyers. We're going to have mixed panels. We want a mixed crowd. We're going to be talking about things like methane compliance and the technology, the law and the technology both together on these panels. Maritime, what are we seeing in the maritime energy sector? How does the law of the sea play into that, right? So really, really cool stuff. If you're not following, by the way, if you're not following me and Mike Peel, my producer, on Full Crew, subscribe to that. Go to fullcrew.io, because we're going to use that list and send out notifications also to these law technic workshops next year, including this one for EDRC. So super excited about that. We got another question here from Dean Ford. Great discussion. Should beyond visual line of sight be a unique tier of certification? Advanced RPAWS in Canada and Part 107 in the US may not be enough, sort of like an IFR rating for a private pilot. I believe the Aviation Rulemaking Committee, or the ARC, did recommend a specific certification.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense if you consider that, as I was mentioning earlier, on internal programs that energy companies have, they're tracking the types of work and projects and hours and flights in order to internally create certifications and levels of competence. So when you imagine that BVLOS is considered, the very top or the most, enabling of technologies, but also one of the highest risk, even with the right technology and training, then I think if you think about that, Dean, then yeah, it makes sense to me that you would have some level of BVLOS certification being unique, in that way it allows perhaps if the technology and the certification of the person in charge of the project is at the right level, then hopefully that allows it to where you don't require things like waivers, and you're able to do it on a more consistent basis by combining the right technology with the right certification.
Yeah, and training and certification, they really do go hand in hand. And I'd be remiss not to give a quick shout out to the Sonoran Desert Institute, who sponsored this entire month of emerging leaders. They're doing not only training, but education out there in Arizona. And Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force retired, Fred Bavetto, is their testing lead, but he actually created the training for drone pilots for the United States Air Force. And that's the level of folks they have on their staff. I'm not going to go through the whole staff, but just to kind of tie this in about, certification, training, and, the shout out to SDI. You'd be in good hands to check out their website and see what they're offering. And I know they can't talk about things that aren't accredited, because they are accredited. But I guarantee that as this industry evolves and beyond visual line of sight requires additional levels of training and certification, I assume SDI is going to be on the leading edge of that. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for more. And by the way, Steven Zirkle saying y'all had great lunch selections here too. It's so funny that Steven said that, because it kind of is a little bit about the food when you come to a conference. Because you're here you're running hard. Most people do. And having that food is great. So I agree. I think it was a great effort overall with the food as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, nobody loves a rubber chicken. So you want you want the quintessential good food, and and you want the right atmosphere, and that's why we love having the lunches, the receptions, and having everybody involved, so that you have a large amount of people who are able to connect. And I think a lot of the networking and information and fact finding, frankly, happens in that time period.
Yeah, absolutely. And no pun intended. It's been very high energy this week. And it's just been a lot of fun just seeing so many, old friends and meeting new ones. So I know I've benefited greatly from it. And I think everybody that's come here, Sean, has as well. We are, as usual, getting close to the end of our time, which is crazy. So let's do this, Sean. Why don't you tell us, how you wrap it up for us? What should we be doing? What should we be looking for? How can we find you?
Sure, absolutely. So first, I just want to reiterate, we really appreciate, Don, getting the opportunity to work with you And we love working with the team and being involved, not just in your podcast, but having you share your subject matter expertise with us, whether it's through our newsletter or whether it's through the ability to run our panels and help us moderate. So I just want to thank you again, because it was so successful working together on all these areas and taking it to a whole nother level with Law Tech Connect. So thank you. Appreciate all of that.
Thank you.
As well as for all of you in the rest of the industry, I just want to make sure everyone understands we have a big tent theory. So if you weren't able to get involved this year and you're hopefully able to consume some of the information post-event, but please, next year we're going to be back in June again, June 12th through the 14th. We'd be excited to work with you. So whether it's showcasing your technology, giving us a use case update, you're a startup, or you have a great story to tell that we need to be putting on stage, please reach out to me, okay? And the best way to do that is through the EDRcoalition.com website. There's multiple ways that you see to connect with me. Also on Twitter, I'm at Sean Guerre, or on LinkedIn, and I answer all my DMs as fast as I can. So please reach out. Let's work together and let's help grow the industry. Look forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got some nice comments coming in about the outstanding conversation and discussion. And Chris Geneseth is out there saying it was a great interview and he wishes he could have been here. Chris, I wish you would have been here too. We missed you. Chris is a member of AUVSI Lone Star, works with Adrian Doko, and they had a great presence here. So we got to see, Adrian and, the crew. So we missed you as well. So anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for jumping into the chat. This was super active today, Sean, and people clearly love what you are doing. And I know this because the overwhelming response that we had in Clubhouse, the fact that people have been really engaging with you here it's not, typical, honestly, that we have so many folks asking questions this actively, and this has been amazing. So thank you, Sean, and thank everybody out there. Just a reminder, tomorrow on our Clubhouse, Drone Law Connections, which is, I'm going to be in Central Time, so noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have Julie Garland from AvTrain coming at us live from Ireland. And when you think about beyond visual line of sight and some of the groundbreaking work that is being done, they've been doing real live, not just trials, Sean, real live operations at the Shannon Airport in like Class B airspace. So it's going to be spectacular talking to Julie, who, by the way, is an Air Awards recipient for training. And next week, oh my gosh, let's see. Next week, it's going to be Julie on this podcast, same time, same place. And Julie is actually a Volatus Above and Beyond series guest. So Volatus has philanthropically endowed a number of people and companies to be on this podcast, which frankly is a rarity for a company with, without a direct relationship with a lot of these companies. It just wants to elevate what other companies are doing and elevate the whole industry. So thanks again to Volatus for that. And we are at time. Thank you again, everybody. Fly safe, fly right. We are out here.